Hi, this is Patty Hodge, and this is Dr. Nurse's Rock. Today we have a special guest, Mr. John Freedom, who is an educator and a trainer in Santa Rosa, California. He's a researcher of energy psychology, the author of Heal Yourself with Emotional Freedom Technique. He serves as a research coordinator for ACEP, which is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And he's an executive director of FREA, Finding Recovery and Empowerment from Abuse. He holds certifications in E.F.T, N.L.P, E.M.D.R, and Auricular Acupuncture. He serves on the editorial boards of the Energy Psychology Journal and the International Journal of Healing and Caring. He leads seminars and trainings throughout the U.S. and Europe, and I am very grateful and pleased and honored that you're here with us today, John. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Patty. Yeah, thanks for
Uh,
inviting me.
I'm so grateful that you came and you're willing to do this with me. Uh,
Yes,
John, for the sake of people that don't know anything about energy psychology, which may be some of us, could you explain to me what it is and how you got involved with it?
sure. Okay. So the term energy psychology is an umbrella term for a family of methods that relieve emotional distress and treat psychological conditions like anxiety and depression and addictions and etc. and PTSD, of course, by stimulating what is called the body's energy systems. Okay. And the idea is that just as our physiology, for example, if you really want to understand psychology, you really have to study neurology and the biology of the brain. So the idea is that our energetic substructure, if you will, okay, which consists of the meridians, the chakras, which are energy centers, and the biofield, are the deepest or most fundamental layer of who we are as spiritual beings on a spiritual level, these energetic layers, okay? And that by stimulating and working with blocks or imbalances in these energetic layers, that they can relieve, as I mentioned, psychological conditions.
So, um, for the sake of people that may be thinking this is not a real thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, very much real. Very, very much so.
It's very powerful, and I have experience with it, and you have experience with it, of course, obviously. So tell me, how do we know it's real? What's the evidence?
Okay. Where's the beef? Where's the research? Okay. Well, amazing that, people ask me this all the time. They say, well, yeah, that sounds nice, but is there any real research on this? And Patty, the amazing thing is that there have been over 200 studies, research studies, published in peer-reviewed journals, okay, including more than 100 randomized controlled trials, between 80 and 90 what are called pre-post outcome studies, then about 20 what do you call it, case study, clinical case studies, okay? But then also 13 meta-analyses and 28 systematic reviews. And of course, meta-analyses are, studies of studies where they gather all the evidence together and they attempt to compare them and, collate them and then compare them back and forth and that kind of thing, okay?
Mm.
And with all these studies, it's amazing that all of them, except for one, all the studies found evidence for efficacy, on at least one of the measures that they're researching. And what's interesting about energy psychology also, Patty, is these are not just psychological conditions that we're looking at, okay? Very interestingly, they they have found that not only are there changes in our body's psychological structure, but also in biological markers such as cortisol, lowered blood pressure, favorable expression of genes that influence emotional regulation and learning, and synaptic connectivity and immunity, and then improved heart rate variability, which is a measure of, how the heart rate varies moment to moment to moment, which we want it to vary, okay? And then also increased lymphocyte production, which are increased white blood cell production after or during while, you using one of these techniques.
Right.
So there are hardcore physiological measures, documenting that, you know, that these are not just psychological conditions, Okay.
Right. And it's not woo-woo as the term
Well,
has.
some people think it's woo-woo. They can do think that.
So, but one of the things that is so impressive about you, John, is that you have the expertise in so many of these different modalities. So, I rattled off some alphabet soup, as you call it, earlier, with the words EFT, NLP, EMDR, and then this auricular acupuncture.
Yeah.
So, what are these things, and are they different from one another, or are
Oh,
they
yeah. Well, of course, yeah. The different levels are different.
okay?
So, yeah. And Patty, these are something called the alphabet soup therapies
Yes,
because
yeah.
they all have acronyms. Okay. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's a relatively new method for rapidly resolving emotional distress and trauma, and that is done by tapping on acupressure points. Okay, and actually EFT is a combination. It's actually a hybrid technique. It involves techniques taken from cognitive psychology, cognitive therapy. Okay, along with exposure therapy, and then along with stimulating, as I mentioned, these energy meridians which run up and down the body. Okay, and EFT was initially developed to treat. Well, EFT is a derivative of T.F.T, which is thought field therapy. And the way that that came about was that many years ago, there was a psychologist named Roger Callahan who was living in Palm Springs, California, and he specialized in the treatment of fear and phobias. And one time he was working with this lady who had very, very, very severe phobia of water. She would not go near the ocean, not go near a pool. She would not even take a bath or a shower. Reportedly, she would just pour a couple of inches of water into a little pot and give herself a sponge bath, but tremendous, phobia of water. Okay. And Callahan had been working with her for over a year with with standard exposure therapy techniques and not getting, very far. And one day, and so one day she mentioned that associated with her fear of water, she felt this nausea in her stomach. Now, coincidentally, Callahan was studying applied kinesiology, which is muscle testing. Okay. And he knew from his study of kinesiology that nausea, in the stomach associated with the stomach meridian, which is right here. So he said to her, "Why don't you try something? Just, gently tap on this point, below the eye." And he was not expecting much, but anyway, the nausea disappeared, dissolved, which he was expecting. But then she said, "Doctor, I don't think I'm afraid of water anymore." And he could not believe this, because he'd been working on this for over a year. So he said, "Well, we need to check this out." And so it turned out that he had a home office. There was a pool in the backyard. So they walked over to the pool. She kind of ran over, stuck her fingers into the pool, and had no reaction. And then several days later, this is in Palm Springs, which is about 2.5 hours away from the coast. There was a very severe thunderstorm. So she got in her car, drove through the rain, drove up to the beach, walked right up to the ocean and the waves, and she realized that this terrible fear that had paralyzed her for years was gone.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like a lot of discoveries in science, this was a serendipitous discovery,
yeah.
but he realized that there was something about this tapping thing that, and he couldn't let it go. So then he began, doing extensive research, using muscle testing, tapping on different points. And there are 12 meridians, okay? So tapping on different points in different sequences, for different conditions. And over time, he evolved this therapy that he called T.F.T or thought field therapy. And then the E.F.T, which I mentioned before, emotional freedom technique, was developed by one of Roger Callahan's students, who was a man named Gary Craig. Okay. And Gary was very interesting. He's not a psychologist or a therapist, has no background in mental health at all. He was an engineer from Stanford. Okay. But he had an interest in peak performance. And so he looked at Callahan's system and he took one of Callahan's courses and he just realized that this was just amazing, just very amazing, very powerful technology. But the way it was being marketed and packaged, that it would never really, spread very widely. And so, um, being an engineer, he asked himself, what is the simplest way, the easiest way to put this together? And he thought that rather than trying to use muscle testing each time to determine which meridians are involved, which points are involved, why not just tap on all? There's only 12 meridians. Why not tap on all 12? And so he did that, put that together, began working with clients, found that it was very effective, and he developed his own variation, his own modification that he called EFT or emotional freedom techniques.
Yes.
And I've studied both, but I practice EFT because it's easier to use, easier to apply. It's much simpler and more straightforward. But
And people can learn it for themselves, basically. And that's what your book is about too, is teaching them people to use
yes.
it for themselves.
But the other thing about this is that, yeah, it is being used by a lot of thousands of, counseling psychotherapists, okay, because it is effective, but also EFT is a simple, self-healing, self-empowerment tool that people can do by and for themselves.
Yes, yes. And I have used it on myself for many, many years, very effectively. And I didn't use it in my practice because I worked in a psychiatric clinic.
Yes.
And at the time, they were looking for only evidence-based treatment so that they could get paid.
Right.
But I did use it with family and friends and other people in the community who needed this. And I have some stories, and I'm sure you do too. But before we get to some of those stories, talk to me about what exactly is the other things, the N.L.P and the E.M.D.R.
Okay. Yeah, so these are different therapies that I practice, and of course thousands of other people practice as well.
Mhm.
NLP has sometimes been called the study of the structure of subjective experience. Okay. Yeah, right. That's kind of a mouthful. What is that? Okay. But what they've done, it was developed by two men, two professors actually, John Grinder and Richard Bandler, who were at UC Santa Cruz at this time. Okay. But they began looking at what do people do inside their minds, okay, when, for example, they recall a memory, or when they start to feel anxious or upset, or when they modeled, they did a lot of what was called psychological modeling, and they modeled three therapeutic wizards, Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, and Milton Erickson, okay? And they videotaped, they spent hours and hours and hours videotaping them, and then they looked at not what they said they did, but what they actually did, okay? And they developed these again these routines, these patterns. One of their books was called Patterns of the Psychotherapy of Milton H. Erickson. Okay, they developed these patterns, and out of these patterns, they synthesized this system of techniques called NLP.
Now that's fascinating. And that involves what? When you practice that, what do you look for when you are looking at NLP in particular?
You're looking at all kinds of things, but one thing that you look for is body language and rapport. Another thing is they look at what are called eye accessing cues. And
Okay.
so, for example, they discovered that, again, they were videotaping people, but they found that when people look up, well, let me back up. When people are talking, you probably can't see it with my eyes, but we'll look left or right, or we look around, but we look in different places in our visual field to
Yes.
access specific memories. And so when we're looking up, we're accessing visual memories. If you're looking left or right, accessing auditory memories, okay? And then looking down, one side looking down on the left is accessing what are called auditory digital memories, okay, which are, self-talk, the self-talk that we do to ourselves. Or if we look down and right, we're accessing kinesthetic, emotional, feeling memories. Okay. But the point is that different memories are stored in different areas of our visual field. And they found, for example, well, they found all kinds of things. But one little thing, for example, is that if you say you have a negative memory, okay, some kind of, painful memory, and if it's, let's say that the person looks down here, this is down my left, okay, looking down in here. If you simply take that memory and just like on a computer, if you click on it, click and drag it up to your upper part of your visual field, it will change how you feel about it just by physically moving the location of the memory.
So that's where EMDR comes in.
Well, it's related, and actually, EMDR was developed by a psychologist named Dr. Francine Shapiro
Yes.
back in the late 1980s. But coincidentally, for a while, Shapiro had worked in John Grinder's office in Santa Cruz. And so there is speculation, this is not proven, but there's speculation that EMDR was derived in part from NLP because she would have known about NLP because Bandler and Grinder, John Grinder and Richard Bandler, were just developing it at that time. Okay. But anyway, what EMDR is, again, another method, alphabet soup, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so Shapiro said that one time she was walking along outside in a park and there was something that was bothering her. Okay. It was really on her mind. And while she was walking, she noticed her eyes began flicking back and forth. Okay. And then while her eyes were flicking back and forth, after doing this for about 5 minutes or so and walking, she noticed that she was not distressed, she was not upset about that memory or experience any longer. So then she began experimenting with it and then began using it with clients and developed this whole system and an 8-step protocol called EMDR, again, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a very, very powerful therapy.
Yes, all of these are so powerful that it's hard to even put in words how effective they are and how many people they've helped in the world. But now that eye movement is something that's also done in EFT.
Yes.
It's one of the techniques of the umbrella of EFT,
Yeah.
or
Again, EFT stands for emotional freedom techniques,
yeah,
plural.
yes.
There are a number of different techniques subsumed within the umbrella of EFT, okay? Um, but one of them is after you tap on this sequence of points, there's something where you do something called the nine gamut sequence. And
Yeah.
so on the back of the hand, there's this point here, which is a triple warmer point. And triple warmer, again, or triple heater, is one of your body's 12 meridians. It's called triple warmer point. But you tap on this point here in between the knuckles of the fourth and fifth fingers, right in this little valley here. And
Mhm.
while you're tapping here, you gently close your eyes and then open your eyes and you look down and left, my left, and look down and right. And very slowly roll the eyes in a great big circle, slowly. And then you roll the eyes in the opposite direction, rolling around. Okay. And then you hum, for example, and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's da ba 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 ba. Okay. And all this stuff has evoked a lot of skepticism and a lot of criticism because they're saying, "What are you talking about? Tapping and moaning and rolling your eyes, and what does this have to do with any? What does it have to do with psychology?" But you try it, you do it, and it works. It's just
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, so that brings me to a question, because there is a challenge in the professional world. Is this something that you should be using in a psychology setting?
Yep.
And you and I both know about this history because I was living and working in a place where I couldn't use these things because they said, well, doesn't fit the criteria for psychological work.
Right.
And I think what happened there is that we spoke about this earlier in another conversation that they changed the rules midway about what was
So what
part
has
of it.
happened is that um, the big organization, the psychology field, of course, is the APA, the American Psychological Association.
Right.
And they have different divisions. They have 30 or 40 or 50 different divisions for your like forensic psychology and psychotherapy and et cetera. One division is Division 12, which is the Society of Clinical Psychology. Okay. And they maintain a list of what are called ESTs, evidence supported therapies. Okay. And so because I mentioned I'm a member of ACEP, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology that you had mentioned. And so we went to and wrote to the APA to Division 12 and submit a formal application, say we would like to submit an application to be recognized as an evidence-supported therapy. And they said, okay. And they had published criteria on their website, which was called the Tolan criteria, named after one of their, the chairman of Division 12, David Tolan. Okay. And so we had looked at their criteria, and according to our count, by our measurement, that EFT more than met the criteria for to be recognized as an evidence-supported therapy. So they looked at it, and then what they did, I can laugh, it's kind of funny, but they changed the criteria. Not only did they change the criteria, just last year they changed the definition of psychological intervention in such a way to exclude not just EFT, but to exclude all somatic therapies. If
Isn't
you're body or doing any kind of thing, somatic therapy. And as you know, there's this mind, the mind is part of the body, body part of, there's this mind-body continuum, okay?
Well,
And very often, especially with trauma, which is held in the body, the fastest and most effective way to treat trauma is using somatic therapies like, for example, Peter Levine's, you know,
yes, yes.
traumatic experiencing, for example, or EMDR, for example. Okay, but anyway, they redefined, they changed the definition of psychological therapy, psychological intervention, such as to exclude, all somatic interventions. And this is just like, changing the goalposts in the middle of the game.
It seems ridiculous. And
Well,
well, number one, we can't separate body and mind and spirit and emotions. It's all part of who we are as human creatures. So it, I guess they want to treat specific things, just like a psychiatrist says, this is the body of things we're going to treat, and this is how we're going to treat it.
yeah,
We'll give you a pill or an injection, or we'll send you to a therapist. And a therapist should be able to do what a therapist needs to do in order to bring relief to a client.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, let me give you a couple examples of the
yes,
research.
please.
Okay, um, so. Probably most of our listeners will be familiar with the Rwandan genocide, which is horrific, and somewhere between 800 and a million, 800,000 and a million people were killed brutally, mostly with machetes, okay,
Yes. Yeah.
1994. And so two of our psychologists, Carolyn Sakai and Suzanne Connolly, went over to Rwanda, and I think this is about 2006 approximately, okay? But they went to this orphanage, and this orphanage held children whose parents had been killed in the genocide. Okay. And they had classic PTSD symptoms, nightmares, flashbacks, couldn't sleep at night, acting out, aggression, and etc., difficulty concentrating and so on. Okay. And they couldn't work with all the children. So the administrators of the orphanage said, well, how do we decide which children to work with? And they said, give us 50 of your worst cases. Okay, they have this for 50 of them. Okay. And so they came to these children, and they initially planned to do 3 sessions with them, but logistically, for some reason, it didn't work out. So they only did one session with these children, okay, and that was conducted to an interpreter because the children did not speak English. So they conducted these to an interpreter with Rwanda, and the session consisted of asking the children to recall painful memories, recall memories while they were tapping while
Yes.
they were tapping these points, okay, and they found that before the intervention, and they measured them both on a self-report, written self-report, but they also had their caretakers rate them on their symptomatology before and after. Okay, and after one session, okay, and sometimes these not even last an hour. One session conducted to an interpreter, they found that their symptoms relieved, flashbacks relieved, they were able to sleep and whatnot, and all their condition improved. They were happier, able to recall happy memories about their childhood. Anyway, they returned 1 year later and they rechecked them and they found that 1 year later those results had held after only one session.
Yeah,
Okay.
it really is a miracle to help people that way, so quickly, so efficiently.
This is one reason for the skepticism, Patty, is that you can't do this with talk therapy.
Right.
This is outside the realm. This is, and some people have thought that this is voodoo or this is weird, but just tapping on points. But yeah, this is, I won't say common, but it does happen a number of times.
Yeah, and I personally have had experiences of this working so quickly and effectively. And I've been in therapy. I say to people, if you're a therapist, you should be in therapy.
Yes.
And so I've been in therapy a long time, on and off, and especially during times of high stress or whatever. And I've used it on myself with great effect. I mean,
Yeah.
I helped myself when I had a migraine, and I
Right.
tapped and I did chase the pain, is what Gary Craig used to call this, I think. And it was on the side of my head. It was extremely painful. I was at work. I was afraid I'd have to leave, and so I just used. I think it was actually 5 rounds of the tapping points,
Right.
and I felt the pain move from my head down my neck, right down into my stomach. It just went boom,
Yeah.
and I could go on with the rest of my day. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
no one could sit with me and talk that away,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And I didn't want to, if I had to take a medication, it would take a while for that to take effect.
Yes,
So
yes.
I think as soon as you teach someone something and they have it, it's theirs for life and they can use it whenever they need to
Yeah.
use it.
So as you mentioned, this is a self-help, a self-healing and self-empowerment tool that
Yes,
people can define for themselves. And that's one reason why I feel so excited about it.
it is.
Now, to give you another idea, a number of years ago, I was teaching EFT and I taught a class at a hypnotherapy school. And I wanted to do a demonstration, so I talked to the director of the school in advance, and I asked her if she knew someone who I could do a demo with. And so she brought in this young woman, and the only thing I knew about her was that this lady has a lot of problems, you know. And I mean, she could have been schizophrenic for all I knew. We have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But this young woman came in her 20s, and she would not even look at me at first. She was just looking down, not even make eye contact with me. And so I asked her what her problems were, and she said anxiety and depression and also eczema. Okay. And so I chose to work with the eczema, not because I thought I could cure eczema in a demonstration, but because sometimes with physical symptoms, sometimes you get immediate feedback. Sometimes.
Yes.
Okay. So I asked her about her condition, and she said that whenever she thought about her eczema, her skin felt hot, felt physically hot. Okay. And she also said that she did not like to go out because she never knew when her eczema was going to break out. Very interesting. Okay. So I had her close her eyes, get in touch with herself, notice this eczema, notice the eczema symptoms, associate with the symptoms. And then I said to her, when you're in touch with these symptoms, about how old do you feel? Okay. And she says 15. What was going on in your life when you were 15? Yeah. She thought for a moment and then she started sobbing for a couple minutes. And then finally, after, a couple minutes or so, 2, 3 minutes, she settled down and she said, when I was 15 years old, I was living at home. I couldn't bring my friends over because our place was a mess. Mother and brother were constantly fighting. My brother committed suicide, killed himself, and then I blamed myself for it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there it was. There's a whole major trauma underlying these symptoms. But
Yeah.
one of the comments she made, which she said that she couldn't bring any of her friends over because she she never knew when her skin was going to break out, and
That's
she couldn't bring friends over to the home because she never knew when a fight was going to break out.
okay.
She used that same language, never knew when
Right.
a fight was going to break out. Okay. So then I just had her close her eyes, well, open her eyes, and just get in touch with these symptoms. We began doing tapping. Even though my mother and brother were fighting constantly, even though that my I couldn't bring my friends over, even though I felt ashamed and embarrassed, even though I felt humiliated by this eczema condition, even though my brother killed himself, okay, whatever, and then doing the sequence of points. And I worked with her for, probably a little bit less than an hour, okay? But by the time we finished, she was associated, she was connected, she was looking me at the eyes, she was, feeling much more strong and stable. So I handed her off to, as I mentioned, this hypnotherapy school to one of the hypnotherapy students, and I asked her to follow up with her, and she did 2 more sessions with her. But after the total of 3 sessions, she said that her eczema had cleared up by 95%.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. My own personal study that I did for my doctoral program was on
Right. Yeah, you
skin.
did research
Yes.
on psoriasis, right?
Yes. Yes. And I mean, the results were really remarkable because it is an autoimmune disorder.
Yes.
And it is something that people do suffer with a great deal. And just to give someone a sense of relief or some control over their own bodies of what's happening with them, it was a great joy to be able to do that with people.
Again, with these autoimmune conditions, these are psychosomatic conditions,
Yeah.
psyche and soma, psychosomatic conditions. And techniques like psychosensory techniques like EFT can, not always, but can be effective sometimes for some of these conditions. One of the researchers in our field is a man named Dr. Dawson Church, and he did a research on frozen shoulders. And frozen shoulders, can be people have them for years. They can be
Yes.
very intractable to treatment. Okay. And so he did divide these people into 2 groups. There was about, I don't know, 20 or 30 people in the study, okay? But compared, some people did what's called diaphragmatic breathing, okay? Just deep breathing, basically, while the other group did this EFT. Okay. And did just 45 minutes session of either tapping or diaphragmatic breathing with them. And they came back and they found that with the EFT group, their psychological symptoms, anxiety or depression, whatever, had decreased. Okay. But that their pain levels had decreased tremendously, but then also their range of motion had greatly increased.
Yeah.
In range of motion, I could say maybe it's placebo that, that they feel better, okay, that, placebo effects happen, but, range of motion, this is a real physical condition, okay?
Yeah.
And this happened after one 45-minute session, and again, at a 30-day follow-up.
Yes. Although, the term psychosomatic has gotten sort of bad rap, I think. People think, well, it isn't real if it's psychosomatic, or it's less than having a car accident or something like that. It's pain is very real and it's
Yes,
very subjective. And it's, emotional pain is very physical sometimes. And
yes,
so we really have to take into to account that the body is trying to help us.
yes,
We're a living, breathing creature.
yes,
Body wants to support what we're here to do with
yes,
our souls and our spirits, what we're here to do on this planet at this time. And so when the body has this capacity to recover, it has this capacity to heal, it has this capacity to give us information, and
right.
we could be listening to the information that it's trying to give to us. So I'm looking at the time. I mean, I could go on for another hour with you, but I can't for our viewers' sake. And I would love for you to come back and talk to us more about this or something else related to this that I'm sure that the viewers have questions. And if you'd be willing to answer those questions, I can forward them to you, or we can arrange for you to come back and we can discuss those things if you'd
Yeah,
like.
if you have to answer any questions, people forward them to you, and then, yeah, I can, yes.
I would love that. And now, could you show us your book so that
Oh,
we can look for that? I did purchase it, but it hasn't arrived yet.
okay, so thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is published in 2013. I
Okay.
wrote this book called Heal Yourself with Emotional Freedom Technique. Okay. And this was actually published in the UK by a publisher in London named Hodder and Stoughton.
So what I'll do is I'll put a link down below with how to reach you or ACEP or whatever. I'll have probably 6 or 7 links down there and how to get a hold of your
Well, the
book.
best way to get this is by Amazon.
Yes.
Everything's on Amazon.
I'll put a link to the Amazon page that I purchased the book from. And also so your biography I'll put in there for people to see. And so
Okay.
I just want to say thank you. You know that I do appreciate you so much and that you've been willing
You
to come
too.
and talk to this channel and to be part of this adventure. Uh,
Yes.
so
Great
hopefully,
adventure.
hopefully we will see you again and not too far in the future.
Okay, great.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Blessings to you.
Yeah, and you too, Patty. And you're very welcome, of course.
Thank you so much. So bye for now.
Bye-bye.